right, welcome back to the Sacred Science of the Michael Prophecies. We are now on the final episode, which is going to be a lot shorter, and we're just going to have some fun with this. It is the time-traveling dinosaurs. Now, this is actually, although I say it's fun, it's also very exciting, and I think there's some incredible scientific discoveries waiting for us in this, Chris. We were talking about how there are spherical energy chakras in the galaxy. And you remember we saw these diagrams from Dr. William Tift, in which these numbers that you see on each of these round circles, first of all, the whole thing says Virgo dwarfs. So this is the Virgo supercluster of galaxies. And we know they all have geometry in them because we saw that. So what's so weird about this is that you got all these different numbers for each of the concentric circles. It starts at 10 on the bottom, and then you see there's a 30, there's a 40, there's a 50. Then you see a 90 up there right near the middle, and then above it you got a 70, 60, 20, 10, etc. Okay, so we said that these have been determined to have different microwave frequencies, and they don't change gradually, they change all at once, and they change in very even mathematical intervals. When they change, that means that the star has actually gone through some type of energetic transformation, and it seems to be a solar flash. In fact, we remember that's what Tift said was going to happen. In his own paper, he expected a solar flash. So we also saw this as a graph of several other galaxies where this is happening. The next thing we talked about is that within these expanding spheres, there are going to be harmonic geometries. And we talked about the 24.8 million year cycle, as well as they called it the 26 million year cycle originally, but it appears that the numbers got screwed up by what Dr. Robert Rode discovered later, which was that 62 million year cycle. So once again, the 62 million years is an octahedron. It's 248 divided by 4. If you have a 248 million year galactic orbit, you chop it up into 4 pieces. Now that's what usually is happening here in this illustration. We have a bobbing up and down motion of our solar system. I pulled this off the internet, and this particular bobbing up and down motion happens to also take around, they say, 64 million years. So it's very close, once again, to the 62 million years. So actually, there have been theories similar to the Nemesis theory, which I think are kind of more in the right direction, where they theorize that when we cross through the galactic plane, that there's some type of energetic effect or catastrophic effect, maybe, as our solar system goes through that. But it is a very strange thing that we are actually knowingly bobbing up and down. And this bobbing up and down basically seems to be the same cycle as the big octahedron. So going back to the octahedron again, I believe that how this is explained is that as we go towards each corner, we're either going to be going up or down. So we'll be on an upswing as we go towards one, and then once we hit it, we cross over it, we start going on a downswing before we hit the next one, up and down like that. And that's what the observational data actually shows, and it is consistent with the idea of this kind of orbital path around a big geometry whose own gravitational influence is going to nudge you in these interesting ways because there's extra gravity on the nodes. So you can't just fly right into the node. You're either going to go above it or below it because the gravity pushes you away. Does that make sense?
Okay. Interesting.
All right. So the bottom line holy grail here is that when we see this geometry actually do what God intended it to do, if you want to use that term, this is a conduit for time portals, I believe. And the reason I say that is that if you were to be able to get into the right plasma orb, let's say, it is possible that you could take a ride on that plasma orb. Let's go back to the image of the geometry again. You could get a ride on the orb on the right-hand side of the galaxy here and get caught up inside this geometry, which actually is traversable wormhole area in my model of how this is all going to work. This is what Michael's been showing me.
Okay.
We travel through the geometry. We travel through, just like, as I said, when we looked at the cymatics diagrams, and I said that the individual particles move through the whole shape.
Okay.
If you get stuck in this geometry, you fly through it
Interesting.
in a hyperspace.
Okay.
All right. So if you got in on the right and then you get off on the far left, you've now been through 124 million years. But maybe you just go through 124 million years of time, but you're still on Earth.
Interesting.
You understand it. Good. Well, the fact is that we know it's happening because of the fact that there's all these examples of time-traveling dinosaurs. And I love this stuff.
Really?
Oh my God, yeah.
That's interesting.
And so I believe that these time-traveling dinosaurs are literally jumping through 24.8 million year cycles, 62 million year cycles, or various permutations thereof.
Wow.
And they get directly delivered onto Earth.
Okay. That's pretty radical.
So the first
That's
example
extremely
we're going to talk about is the staff that we see so often used in Egypt. This is the typical Bennu staff, as it's called. And then on the top of the staff is what they call the Bennu bird. However, there is no bird conventionally known to humanity that has a weird spike on the back of its head with something that could either be a feather or a growth underneath it. This looks very much like the head of a pterodactyl, and that's what I think it is. So, what is going on here? The pterodactyl, as we're going to see in a minute from this research that was done, when the pterodactyls appear in our reality, they don't fully consolidate into matter at first. The first stage of the appearance of the pterodactyl is that it appears like it's on fire. Its body appears to be glowing orange and yellow. Fire-breathing dragon.
Okay.
Right? I mean, this is a very interesting phenomenon because there are plenty of stories of these creatures attacking humans. And so I'm going to propose that they're getting in through our global grid, which I talk about in the book. We didn't do it in our show here, but that's for another time. So here's one example of Bennu bird, and here's another. This is a very beautiful staff carved out of some turquoise stone in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And once again, we have a very clear, unambiguous depiction of a pterodactyl head on the top of the staff. You don't even have to use your imagination. There is nothing else alive today that looks anything like this. And it gets even better because in this particular Egyptian painting, it looks far more like a pterodactyl stylized than even any of the others did.
Okay.
So it's possible that this information came to them because they were digging up fossils and they saw the fossil and they're like, oh, wow, this is a very religious object. So here's an example of a fossil.
Okay.
Now, that's possible, okay, but this particular Bennu bird is also known to Westerners as the phoenix. And so the phoenix is a bird that disappears in fire and then is reborn.
Sure, out of the ashes, right.
And these creatures, when we actually see them appear in our reality, they're glowing.
Interesting.
So the phoenix appears to be an Egyptian eyewitness sighting of a pterodactyl that came in glowing, attacked people, ate them, and then they, in a primitive society, this would have been the craziest, strangest, most outrageous thing that ever happened. You're looking up in the sky, there's this blinking orange and yellow light, this massive 25-foot wingspan, monster flying dinosaur creature shows up in the air, comes down, grabs somebody. But of course, back to the slide, he only really wants to invite you to dinner. He's not, there's no underhanded scheme going on here. He just wants to sit down, have a friendly meal. And you might be on the menu, but, that's something you'll find out a little later. So the point is, we've got multiple examples of people seeing these things in modern times. First of all, in Zambia and Zimbabwe, they have the legend of the Kongamoto, the recent sightings of a flying lizard with great wingspan and teeth. And on Umboy Island in New Guinea, they have the ropen, which is a flesh-eating flying lizard who looks like a pteranodon. Now, I'm not sure what that picture is below there, but it's just there to illustrate the point. So there was a guy named Jonathan Whitcomb who goes around and takes videos of crime scenes. He's a forensic videographer. And he got very, very excited when he heard about the people in Papua New Guinea seeing the ropen.
Right.
Because these are widespread legends. I mean, and these are dangerous creatures. It's not like you want this to happen. If one of these things shows up, you're in deep trouble because typically they use us as protein.
Sure.
So this is part of the problem. So what we see here is his own press release from PR Web, and it says, pterosaur-like creatures reported in Papua New Guinea. Now, this is his composite sketch of what these creatures actually look like, and this is based upon many, many different eyewitness reports, all combined, put together. And so what we see is it's got this kind of funny ball on its tail. It's got these ridges on its back along the tail. And it's obviously what looks like we would call pterodactyl, and more correct term would be pteranodon or pterosaur. So the technical description from fossils of Sordes pilosus, or the pterosaur, is at the top. And this also includes its height and its width. And then the ropen sighting is sketched below, and they are literally identical. So Jonathan Whitcomb, as a videographer, went there to Papua New Guinea and interviewed people who saw the pteranodon. And he was extremely terrified. I mean, you can see he really didn't want to say anything. He was very evasive. So this is Wesley, and now we're going to see his brother. And before I show you this picture, I want to make it clear that no marijuana whatsoever was involved in this sighting. He was completely sober, straight as an arrow at the time that Pteranodon showed up. We have these guys being very afraid in these videos. And the reason they're afraid is that these creatures actually attack people. And it's not something you want to see. So even though for us it's like, oh wow, it's kind of like Godzilla, and it's kind of like a dragon. Isn't that neat? It's the phoenix, and it's Well, Native Americans have the thunderbird, same thing, exactly. And it's the same problem.
Right, even Quetzalcoatl, you could say.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. So we also have Brian Hennessy in 1971. He's a professional psychologist, and he reported a very disturbing pterodactyl sighting. And then another example was Dwayne Hodgkinson, who in World War II, 1944, he was kind of lucky enough to get stationed out there because there wasn't really any action. And while the soldiers were on this island in Papua New Guinea, they were standing there, and all of a sudden they felt this huge gust of air, and they saw these incredible, gigantic brown wings, 25 feet tall, rise up out of the grass. They come up like this, and they go, and they do this one flap. And as they flap, this wind current hits them, and this freaking creature comes up off the ground, and it's basically a dragon. It's a pterodactyl. And they were completely terrified. Now, they debunked, the official word was that he only saw a fruit bat, mate. So let's go back to the slide. Yes, it's only a fruit bat. It's a flying wingspan of 7 feet. Easily explains a 29.3 wingspan. We saw Dwayne Hodgkinson, of course. I don't think it's a fruit bat, folks.
No, probably not.
I really don't. Now we're going to get to the guy who really ties it all together for us. This was David Wutzel. He's also talked about by the videographer Jonathan Whitcomb. And David Wutzel is the guy who personally traveled to Papua New Guinea and saw the flickering orange and red lights around the body of the thing when it first appears. Apparently, it has something to do with the transdimensional energy as it first comes through the portal. So it actually has this bioluminescent glow. Well, another example that we all know and love is Loch Ness Monster. And this showed up way before the 1930s, but that's when there was a really big peak in sightings. The first documented sighting that I could find of Loch Ness Monster was from 595 AD. St. Columbia wrote about seeing a man buried after he had been bitten and killed by a large monster that came out of Loch Ness. Our interest in general all started in the 1930s with this infamous photograph that I just showed you. And there are over 7,000 documented Loch Ness Monster sightings in the 20th century. All right, so here's the classic picture of Nessie. It's never really been debunked, and I actually think it's probably real. What are your feelings on this one, by the way?
I think that photo's real. I'd like to think it's real. I mean, it's been a steadfast, common thing in my life, so I hope it's real.
Well, here's another one of the classic ones, the Nessie photo. Maybe, maybe not. I'm not sure, but that's another possibility. And then this is an alleged photo of another similar monster in Lake Champlain they call Champ. So, once again, we can solve the mystery of the Loch Ness Monster. It goes back to 595 AD, so we're talking about 1,400 years of documented sightings of this thing. And it looks exactly like a plesiosaurus.
Right, it does.
It really does.
I like to think it's a plesiosaur of some type.
Well, I agree with you. And therefore, how did the plesiosaurus get here?
Well, it's interesting because it's not just Loch Ness. I mean, you pointed out that there's other lochs, there's other lakes throughout the world.
Oh, yeah.
Even in the deep, it seems like every deep lake has a legend of a monster. Even Lake Pend Oreille up in Idaho.
Oh, really?
Yep. So there's all
people
kinds
saw
of stories.
something.
There's the Pend Oreille paddler. I mean, there's all kinds of different monsters throughout many large and deep lakes. If you have a deep lake, they have a monster.
My grandparents lived on Lake Pasico. They had a summer home, Lake Pasico in the Adirondacks, because my grandfather was an engineer, so they had enough money to do that. I only got to go there a few times, once a year, because my parents didn't like it. But even on Lake Pasico, this little lake in the middle of the Adirondacks, somebody had seen a monster, and they called it Pissy.
Okay.
Pissy, the monster.
Sure.
So what I'm proposing, Chris, is rather than the idea of some type of evolutionary containment of a prehistoric animal underneath Loch Ness, what if you have this spherical ball of energy, this portal that's floating through the ocean 75 million years ago? It grabs onto this creature. The creature swims into the portal. He gets stuck in the big octahedron. The next thing you know, bam, he pops out here, right back where he was in Loch Ness again. That's an explanation that also explains how pterodactyls are spontaneously appearing in the sky and people are witnessing this with their own eye. Right?
So it's kind of like I envision this as sort of the scene from the movie The Final Countdown, where you have this giant wormhole that appears out of nowhere. It sucks in the battle fleet, sucks in the Nimitz. They go back in time. They encounter Pearl Harbor. And then before they can actually do anything to change the events, the historical events, they get sucked back into the wormhole.
That's right.
And so that's a fascinating story.
So there's even more supporting evidence, Chris. We're still not done. Check this out. The next one is Mokele Mbembe. And this is a little brontosaurus, or what also could be called, a less familiar term is an apatosaurus, but everybody knows what a brontosaurus looks like. Apatosaurus is just a tiny brontosaurus. So in 1776, French missionaries found huge footprints with claws in Central America, and they resemble the apatosaurus. They were 3 feet in circumference and 7 feet apart. They were as large as the feet of an elephant, but elephants do not have claws. And one priest in 1776 from these French missionaries in Central Africa actually witnessed weird giant lizards munching on vegetation. They're usually seen in the People's Republic of Congo around a very large swamp called Likuala Swamp. This particular area of the Congo is 55,000 square miles, which is larger than the state of Florida, and their own government has officially declared this area 80% unexplored. Now, before we go any farther, there's a reason why these 55,000 square miles are unexplored. And you know what it is?
What's that?
Pygmies.
Pygmies. Oh, my goodness. Okay.
Head-hunting, cannibalistic, dangerous little people.
Okay.
And if they see you, you are a long pig.
Really? They really are cannibals?
Yes.
Oh, my. Okay.
Yes. So if you want to go and explore Mokele Mbembe, and if you have the courage,
Okay.
you have to go into cannibal country.
Wow. Well, this sounds like something we need to use our drones and flying machines for.
That's true, right? If it's 80% unexplored, we
Yeah,
can help out.
We can help out.
Stavati can help
We
out.
can help out. That's
We'll
right.
catch a Mokele Mbembe. I love
That's
it.
right.
All right. So in 1913, a German explorer heard the stories of the Mokele Mbembe from the Pygmy natives. He was brave enough to go out there. They're not all pygmies, but there's a lot of them in this area. That's the main population. The scientists noted that this description was very similar to that of sauropod dinosaurs, which are 70 feet long, and they're about 12 to 15 foot tall at the hips. And natives would kill and eat these creatures when possible. They have Bronto burgers.
Okay.
So this is actually an illustration of Mokele Mbembe hunting by pygmies. Apparently they're very delicious.
Makes sense.
So then we also have Hollywood, who made a movie called Baby, if you remember.
Right.
There was that movie Baby where they found these weird dinosaurs in Africa. Well, that's what this is based on. So the point again here is that it definitely seems as if there's something going on with Mokele Mbembe in that area. And when we look at the global grid, when we look at the map of the global grid, which you and I haven't really talked about in this show, but it's in the books, the global grid has a node right over where this is happening. And Papua New Guinea has a node right over where the pterosaurs are appearing. And there's a node over England where the classic dragons were appearing.
Okay.
And there's a node over Egypt where the phoenix was appearing. So there's these particular places on Earth that appear to be wormholes through space and time. And then another one is the classic architecture that we see in Cambodia. This classic architecture has a stegosaurus in it, folks. This is so bizarre. The temple was dedicated in 1186 AD, and right along the wall, we see this. Now, what is that? Well, darn it. That looks an awful lot like the dinosaur we call a stegosaurus. But if you're enough of a fossil geek as I am, Chris, then you'll probably notice that our typical view of a stegosaurus is that he's got 4 spikes on his tail.
Correct.
And what they seem to have done is they've taken the spikes on his tail, but they stuck them on the back of his skull. Because you notice he's got these nice long spikes on the back of his head. So that's really interesting because that suggests to me that our paleontologists got it wrong.
Maybe.
And that the spikes are not on the end of his tail, they're actually on the back of his head, which actually would make more sense in a lot of ways.
Could be, yeah.
So what is this? Why did they draw this thing? Why did they sculpt this thing into the wall in 1186 AD? I believe that this is something they saw. They saw this creature. And maybe the reason why they saw this creature, once again, is that it portaled in here from 65 million years ago. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a possibility. It could have portaled in. You know, I have 3 different views of this. One is my general view that nothing can really go extinct. And the reason is because our genetic material for everything that ever was and probably ever will be is in this cloud that we had discussed earlier. It's in the information field.
Yeah.
So there are
I agree.
plans. And so if your DNA is tuned to the right frequency, so to speak, you can download the plans for any kind of animal you want. So this gets into entirely new forms of genetic engineering, where it's really fine tuning to get the right DNA that you need to have to get the correct plans and information to create an animal. So this whole idea of something going extinct, I don't think there is any possibility of extinction. I think there's a database out there. And this extends to other planets. So it gets into this whole idea, and the movie 65 that came out.
Okay, yeah, with Adam Driver.
With Adam Driver.
Paleontology thing.
So that's pretty neat in the idea that you have the potential, and this is where I know it's not the storyline, but what I thought of when I heard of that movie was that you have other planets where you do have different kinds of life that we found here on Earth. Oh. And so if this is information within the information field, it permeates the entire cosmos, and there could be other worlds that have similar life forms that we have here on Earth that are spontaneously forming because the DNA downloads this information. So that's one aspect of things. The whole idea that maybe for some reason these creatures, the DNA of something tapped into the right frequency, and so you get these animals being reborn today. The other aspect of this is perhaps there are refuges somewhere on planet Earth, in these different regions where these animals can live for millions of years. And maybe there is a plesiosaur that got trapped in the Loch Ness. Although this is kind of hard to believe over the evolution of time.
How could they breed? There would have to be a bunch of them, right?
Well, there would have to be a bunch of them, yeah.
I looked at that and I said, I don't know. You'd have to have a surviving indigenous population that had the right temperature, pressure, and climate and food supply to make it. Maybe it could happen.
So you have that, and then you have the time travel aspect. And this whole notion of time travel is very interesting. I'm a DeLorean owner. I get asked all the time if I can travel in time. Do I have a flux capacitor in my car? That sort of thing. But this model of time travel is a lot different than the Back to the Future time travel model.
Yeah.
And so it's a different approach than just having the 1.21 gigawatts to jump through some sort of self-generated portal. And that's really the big question. How do you do this time travel? What are the physics behind it? And is it a wormhole? And what are the physics behind a wormhole that could cause time travel or enable it? These are all a lot of great questions. And it harkens back to maybe it's not a Back to the Future model. Maybe it is more like what was indicated in the Final Countdown. And that's conceivable. But the question is, why wouldn't we be seeing this more often? Maybe we do. Maybe these dinosaurs are present. Are we going to find other animal life? It would be interesting to find out if around these dinosaurs, are we also seeing other bacteria, other things that would last a long time? Now, at the same time, we do on planet Earth, we have some trees, we have vegetation, we have plants, we have some animals that have been around for millions upon millions upon millions of years.
That's true.
And as we go back in history and we do more studies and paleontology becomes more advanced, we discover things like beavers have been around a long time. That dinosaurs actually ate beavers, and that there were bigger beavers, 70 million years ago, 100 million years ago, that not everything mammalian is new, that there used to be a type of squirrel, a type of beaver, a type of ancient horse, all these different animals that were back in the days of dinosaurs. So it wasn't just dinosaurs. And, this is a pretty radical thing. And there's articles about that. You can find how paleontologists have found, the proto-beaver living at the age of dinosaurs. And so the dinosaurs may have eaten beavers. And, so that's pretty exciting. And it kind of harkens to the idea that we're not just dealing with evolution from reptiles to birds to mammals, and that there's an age of mammals, there's an age of dinosaurs. There is, but these animals, it's not just like they just come into existence and that's the only kind of animal species you'll find. So mammals have been around a long time. I believe mammals have been around billions of years, and I just don't think it's limited to planet Earth. And this gets into the whole broader topic of, are there human beings in other worlds? And did these human beings in other worlds exist for the same reason these other animals may exist on other worlds? And the reason being that the information to create animals isn't just local to planet Earth. It's not something that's just simply passed on genetically through birth. It ties into this information field where the plans are there, that these animals are engineered perhaps in the information field itself.
And it's photonic. The photon holds the genetic code that builds DNA.
So it's a very different view of the universe. So however it happens to be, whether it's time travel or birth of a creature that we thought was extinct and turns out there is no such thing really as extinction, it's just a matter of information being properly accessed and animals being reborn, or is it something else? The possibility that there are dinosaurs of this nature still around, I think it's not unquestionable.
Well, there was a case of caterpillars that were 2.5 inches thick that fell out of the sky in the Himalayas.
Right.
There's that story. Then there's the coelacanth, which is this weird prehistoric fish that shows up again in the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah, it turns out it's not gone after all. So where did it come from? Did it go away? Has it always been here? Is it being reborn?
It could have portaled in.
Could have portaled in.
Another example that's very strange that I talk about in Sourcefield is that there were duck-billed dinosaur fossils that were fresh, found at the North Pole.
Okay.
And the North Pole is one of these portals.
Well, that again gets into the sightings that Admiral Byrd supposedly made of dinosaurs or large moving animals in this tropical region of Antarctica. So that's
and I believe that was him looking through the portal, because there's plenty of examples of
well,
that.
sure, it could be him looking through a portal. I mean, Antarctica has turned out to be a really exciting place with pyramids and all kinds of neat stuff. So
very much so. All right, well, there you have it, folks. We're going to do more episodes now on some insider topics, but I wanted to get through the full canon of this material. And the time-traveling dinosaur thing for me is really fascinating, Chris, because in summary, we're seeing the same geometry affecting fossil evolution in the dinosaur record. It's the 26 million year cycle, which again, 24.8. We got the 62 million year cycle. There's geometries that correspond to that. Not only do we see the geometry showing us the time periods of when this was happening, but it's possibly a travel mechanism. It's the thoroughfare that they were using. Maybe there's this seemingly innocent looking orb that shows up, and they get popped in. Another thing is, when these species evolutionary events take place, it's not that an asteroid hits the Earth. And I get into this in book 2 of Michael Prophecies. There's actually an eruptive event from inside the Earth. When you have a full-blown solar flash, there's this eruptive event from inside the Earth. You get super volcanoes going off all over the Earth, and there's a lot of new material that's created. So with that in mind, what if, well, we know, and if you go through book 2, you'll see that each time the dinosaurs went extinct or something goes extinct, it usually corresponds to a massive crater that is ejected from inside the Earth.
Okay.
The Chicxulub crater is one example. Each of the main evolutionary events or extinction level events have these craters in the ground.
Are you saying those craters are actually volcanic craters, that these are not impact craters from outer space? That's a different story. That's really a different approach.
The model is that the pressure within the core increases because the plasma goes through a phase shift. Much like if you freeze a glass of water, it's going to break because the ice is bigger than the water. The ice actually expands the space and the glass breaks. So in this case, when the sun does its flash, normally there is a state change in the plasma core of the Earth, and it suddenly gets larger. And what it does is it shoots out through supervolcanoes. And there's evidence of this on the lunar craters. There's evidence of this on the other planets in our solar system. And in book 4, we actually have extraterrestrials telling us, yeah, all the craters you see in your solar system are ejection craters.
So it's not just impact.
No.
Interesting. That's really interesting.
Ejection is what happens because the plasma increases inside the Earth and it has to go somewhere, so it comes out through volcanoes.
Well, you're mentioning plasma inside the Earth. That's a different thought as well. I haven't heard much about plasma inside the Earth. Usually we just see it as a nickel iron core and then magma.
The problem with nickel iron core is that iron no longer conducts magnetic fields at the temperatures that it starts to have as early as 2 miles below the surface of the crust.
Interesting.
It has a thermal magnetic breakdown. So there's no way that... The only reason they say it's iron is they don't know what magnetism is.
Well, when you get into the whole notion of the Earth is a alive planet, it's a living planet that has, and in the sense of not being a dead planet, it has active volcanic activity. And there's something within it that's heating it up.
Right.
And so we've looked at this as being either atomic decay. There is also the various atomic radioisotopes that are decaying. Also, you have the possibility of some type of fusion going on. Not the same fusion as on the sun, but we've been finding the venting of helium-3. And the helium-3 venting indicates that there could be some type of cold fusion, a different fusion process going on. So there could be radioactive decay. There could be some type of fusion. There could be something. But the whole point is that we have a hot core. It's very active. And consequently, generating plasma within there does make sense.
Yeah. This is a model that I actually first heard from Bruce Perrett. It was from an insider thing. And he was an insider who claimed that he had worked at Montauk. And so they worked with generating portals by hooking up a seat from a crashed UFO that had been recovered They hooked up the power supply to it, and they got it to the right frequency, which was some odd decimal point number of hertz. They pumped it in at very high amperage, and then they found that the chair could be used in the way it was originally intended for the ship. So in the ship, you're in your chair, you think about where you want to go, you visualize it in space and in time, and a portal opens up, and then you fly through it and you go there. Now, what Bruce was working on is how to recreate this effect with just the chair, because apparently the chair had the technology in it by itself. So what they did is they energized the chair, and then you would have to put a person in the chair and have them meditate very deeply and reach what they call quiet point. He said there were a total of 22 graphs, I believe, and that they were sine waves. And when the person got to quiet point, the graphs would have different levels of curvature. And then there's a knob under each one, and you basically straighten them out. You get them into straight lines, which is like an oscilloscope. You got 22 of these oscilloscopes. When the person really starts meditating, you zero them out. And at that point, when they're zeroed out, the chair will now operate as an enhancement to the person's own psychic ability on a very dramatic level. This appears to be where X-Men got Cerebro from. Because they use it in every one of those movies. It's the magical chair. You got Patrick Stewart, who was Captain Picard in Star Trek, and he puts the thing on his head, and now he can see everybody. He knows where they are. He can feel their pain. And then in one of the X-Men movies, they use that as a weapon, and he tries to kill everybody through this method, through the chair. So all of those things apparently are based on the Montauk chair. And they found that they could create portals and send people through them. And sometimes people came back and sometimes they didn't. So they actually ended up killing people. Unethical experimentation. So the reason I bring this all up is that the Montauk chair is another example of how apparently the UFO is doing this portal system, which they then create it in front of them and then fly through it. And so that would be a technological way of doing what is happening here with the dinosaurs naturally.
Sure.
You see? Isn't that interesting?
Well, it is interesting, but it also harkens back to the idea of nuclear power as we know it. As we know, if you have enough uranium or plutonium in a certain area, you get to a critical mass and there's a nuclear reaction. Well, there is a naturally occurring nuclear reactor of naturally occurring radioactive uranium that's in Africa. And there's evidence of this based upon the radioactive decay, that it was moderated through a local water stream. And that's a naturally occurring reactor that is very similar conceptually to the reactors that we make that are man-made.
Right.
And so this whole idea that, nuclear reactions occur, it's really a pretty simple effect. You have enough of a material in one place and it happens. In the same token, the creation of a portal, what are you doing? Are you just emulating what nature does on its own in certain circumstances? And that may be the case. I mean, perhaps there are portals that have enabled dinosaurs to fly into time, either into the future or into the past.
Yeah. It's a very fascinating thing to think about. And it also, again, just ties all of our science together. So I don't want to run out of time for us to tape some other things. So we'll end this episode for now. This was Time Traveling Dinosaurs. Had a lot of fun doing this one. Thank you, Chris.
Sure.
And thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next show.
Thousands of babies.
I know. It just takes $10,000 for me to get a PhD, basically. I just haven't had the time.
That's not.
Oh, just $10,000.
Right.
That's true. I have somebody wanting to give me an honorary doctorate, but I just haven't pursued it because it's not that well.
You don't want to get
for what we're doing. It might be good, but in general, I'm like, I don't need to be doctor.
No, you should. You should. That would smash them in the shins.
That's true. That would be a good thing for the haters to have to deal with.
For the haters,
Dr. Wilcock.
Yeah, that's right.